Hi, friends. Welcome back to Save Black Girl Reads, where I am your host, Ariel, the best friend in your head that you never knew that you needed, but you're so glad that you have. Welcome back to week 4 of Becoming, that we are reading by our forever First Lady and former First Lady, Michelle Obama. And this week of week 4, we are tackling chapters 10, 11, and 12, because as you know, we do read in 3-chapter installments for every week. So at this point, we are actually just going to jump right in because, honey, there are so many things that have taken place in these chapters. Even though our forever First Lady has now she's slowed time down. I think in the time span of the chapters that we are looking at, we see her from age 27 to age 29 by the time all is said and done, right? So a time span of like 2 years has passed by in these 3 chapters. So when we get to chapter 10, we find her at age 27. Honey, forever First Lady has decided that being a lawyer is not it for her. She doesn't know what she wants to do, but she knows that this whole doing what she's doing right now is not it. And so, honey, she is in this space of trying to figure out what she wants to do. And ultimately, she is trying to reconcile herself to know and understand that the spaces and the places that she's trying to go and the things that would actually fulfill her would cause for a pay cut. And so she is in a space now of where she's making $120,000 at age 27 at a law firm in like the early 1990s, right? So, sis, that type of money back then carried a lot of weight. And she's looking at her expenses. She's paying almost $600 a month in student loans back. $600. Everything else in terms of her expenses are a whole lot cheaper than her student loans. And her student loans are tremendous. Because again, let's think about this. She has, like, her parents were paying for Princeton, but she went to Harvard as well. So she got 2 Ivy League degrees and they came with a pretty point. So she's in this space now. She's in a place, in a positioning now of journaling, partially inspired now by her boyfriend, our former President Barack Obama, and how he journals a lot. And so she's not necessarily one who's been, quick to journal in the past, but she is doing it now. And it is challenging her in these spaces because now she's actually having to write down the truth and really truth with herself about some of these realizations. And one of the realizations is, child, I don't want to be a lawyer. So also in this space, kind of like, the therapeutic positions of journaling and things like that, she's realizing that Suzanne's death, in tandem with meeting her now boyfriend, she is coming to a culmination that she feels like all of this is derailing her path for what she thought was life and what she thought was purpose for her, to become a lawyer, to be on the fast track to becoming a partner and things of that nature. And in 1 year, Suzanne has died, and it has taught her that life is short. And she's met her boyfriend, and he has this very intellectually deep richness about how he views life, purpose, and the things that he wants to do. And she feels like, I'm not doing enough, or I'm not dreaming hard enough because I don't feel fulfilled in what I'm doing. And so she even talks about it on page 133, where she says, in the span of a year, I've gained Barack and lost Suzanne, and the power of those two things together had left me spinning. Suzanne's sudden death had awakened me to the idea that I wanted more joy and meaning in my life. I couldn't continue to live with my own complacency. I both credited and blamed Barack for the confusion. If there were not a man in my life constantly questioning me about what drives me and what pains me, I wrote in my journal, would I be doing it on my own? And that's a good question, because sometimes I just did a podcast with my best friend TJ, who does this, Timothy Leon. You need to go check him out on the YouTubes. But he has a podcast called That Ain't Cute. And we actually talked about what do you do when you have relationships and friendships and things like that, where, being honest with your friends, being honest with the people in your life. And that part, the portion of being in relationship, intimate relationships, man and woman relationships, boyfriend, girlfriend, fiance, not fiance, all of that. We talked about like that space of actually being in that place of those types of relationships. And one thing that we found is that you do have to have that type of honesty. And I think what our former First Lady was really kind of, what she was kind of like relaying on or sitting with, she's processing through the grief of the loss of her friend, what she felt was unfair in the first place, and the fact that she's now being derailed. The plan is no longer the plan. Yesterday's plan is not today's plan. And now she's in this space of, he's always questioning me about how I want to be fulfilled and things of that nature, which has now gotten her on this path where she realizes being a lawyer don't bring me no joy. And in this space of chapter 10, we also see some transition, because obviously a lot of times in these chapters, we do get the transitional notes and things of that nature. What we have found is that her mom, Mrs. Robinson, is now in her 50s. She's still working full time as an executive assistant at the bank. And there's this interesting dialogue that she has with her mother as she's in this interesting space of like not really knowing what to do with herself. Then she has this moment on page 135 where she says, I see how this must have come across to my mother, who was now in the 9th year of a job she'd taken primarily so she could help finance my college education after years of not having a job, so that she'd be free to sew my school clothes, cook my meals, and do laundry for my dad, who, for the sake of our family, spent 8 hours a day watching gauges on a boiler at a filtration plant. My mom, who just driven an hour to fetch me from the airport, who was letting me live rent-free in the upstairs of her house, and who would have to get herself up at dawn the next morning in order to help my disabled dad get ready for work, was hardly ready to indulge my angst about my fulfillment or the lack of it. In this space of being on page 135, she talks about how her mom says, well, if you're asking me, I say, make the money first and worry about your happiness later. And that's coming from the space of where her mother is. Her mother has been in this job for 9 years, financing college tuition, financing Robbie's health issues, financing other things that are needed that maybe dad's bills can't cover. Financing all of these things. And before that, she was a stay-at-home mom trying to make sure the house was clean, spring cleaning every spring with the pine sol and things of that nature as we've gone through. And now she's having this conversation with her mother, and she's like, in hindsight of reflection, now that she's in her 50s, she's reflecting on everything. She's like, I'm sure I sounded like a little rich snot, talking about how my life has no fulfillment. And I think that's the point. Like, she has grown up with a level of privilege that her mother has never experienced, because if not for the job to finance the things for family, it was, I don't have a job to make sure that I am a bedrock for the family. And I thought that was absolutely beautiful that she was able to make that recognition of how she sounded versus what versus what actually came across in that moment. The sensitivity to her mother in that space, even though she didn't have it in the moment, for her to actually recognize it in hindsight years later. I thought that was absolutely beautiful. Okay. So now that we're no longer talking about the spaces of their moment, so there's also the space of transition here, where we see that Craig has now been introduces Janice, and Janice is okay. So Craig and Janice are married, and we learn that Janice is a telecommunications analyst, and we learn that Craig is getting his MBA, and that he's a vice president of a bank. Because again, when Craig came back from overseas, he jumped into investment banking. And that Craig also drove a red Porsche and was also wrestling with the feelings of feeling unfulfilled. And she actually highlights a lot of that on page 136. We're not going to go over it, but it is a lot. But it talks about how he's also wrestling with that idea of fulfillment, but that neither one of them really want to bring it up because of the pride and the thrill that their father has, knowing that his kids had managed to accomplish these feats of having Ivy League degrees, and they were now lawyers, investment bankers. They're driving Saabs and Porsches, and just like those things. I think they really had a tough time with really coming to the realization that what we're doing is not really what we want to do. So just that. And so we also see in this chapter where her father's MS is progressing. His feet and his throat are swelling, and he is refusing to go to the doctor to make an appointment until they have like this family intervention on page 138. And our forever first lady talks about how in a conversation like this, the role of the tough talker almost always fell to me. I told my dad that he owed it to us to get some help, that I planned to call his doctor in the morning. Grudgingly, my dad agreed, promising that if I made the appointment, he would go. Which I thought was really, really nice. But what we then learned is that she made an appointment, and then she rolled over in the morning and she found her daddy getting ready to go to work, as if they didn't have that conversation just last night. And what she learns is that I'm just going to have to allow my dad to do what he does, because if I do anything else outside of that, it may just affect his pride and his ability to really continue to care for us in the way that we need him to be around and stick around and care for us. So they have that conversation, but then we loop back around to her and former President Barack, and they are discussing marriage in a more serious way. And they notice that they have differing views due to the differing backgrounds. So she talks about how they are the products of how they were raised. She talks about how he experienced marriage as ephemeral, how his mother had been married twice, she had been divorced twice, and in each instance she managed to move on with her life and with her career and her children intact. She then talked about, for her parents, they had locked in early and they locked in for life, and they were already in 30 years they had ever hardly spent one night apart. So there is a lot of the differences between his thought processes on what marriage are and hers. And so it's a lot that they continue to have to discuss about, marriage, things of the like, and why they see the things. And so here's my tidbit of advice is for those of us, because sometimes you do meet a man and he's not necessarily ready, or bro, sometimes you meet a woman and she's not necessarily ready because of the product of her lifestyle and what she's seen before her. Maybe or before him. Maybe they've seen something that really has not been successful in terms of marriage, but they're not necessarily all the way opposed to it. Here's my thought process. If this is inspiring change and growth and constant change and growth, and there's a constant sense of communication, then I think that it is worth having multiple conversations around marriage and whether or not you and the person that you want to be with can see a future together with each other. Because I think comparing your relationship and saying, do they want kids? Do they want marriage? Do they want the white picket fence? If they say yes, you need to follow up with do you want these things with me? And if that is also a yes, then I think it is worth continuing to have the conversations around marriage to say, well, when? Because I would like, and then also putting into the space what you would like. I would like to be married by X, Y, and Z and blah, 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 blah. Now, what do we need to do to get to that? Because I think being bold and honest enough to be in those spaces together, like, yes, especially if you all are cohabitating and, you know, stuff is happening in an intimate space. Like if you are willing to have that, if you are willing to be intimate in that space but unwilling or scared to have that conversation, something is off, sis. Something is off, bro. If you're willing to do those things in the intimate space, come on and let's be bold to have these conversations, okay? On the flip side of that, if you have a significant other who is out here saying, I don't mind marriage, but also marriage ain't nothing but a piece of paper. It ain't nothing but, you know, it ain't nothing but heartache, and the man is the only one who suffers. Sis, bro, come on, y'all know what we do at this channel. I need y'all to do what? I need you to lean in all the way in, because there are those who will put you in the space of, I don't see the purpose of marriage. It's nothing but a piece of paper. And here's the response that I need you to get. I need you to get a backbone and a spine. And I need you to stand up tall, 20 feet if you have to. And I need you to regurgitate these words. Your car title is on a piece of paper. Your money is printed on pieces of paper. Your house deed is on a piece of paper. Any other official documents in terms of a lawsuit or any other documents that will transfer assets to you is on a piece of paper. An invoice from the hospital is on a piece of paper. A will is printed on pieces of paper. And I want you to stand tall, 20 feet if you have to. And the reality and the realization that pieces of paper are powerful depending on what is on it. Did you catch that word, sis? Did you catch that word, bro? Let me say it again for the saints and the ain'ts in the back. Pieces of paper are powerful depending on what is printed on it. So we are done. We are done with these excuses of it is nothing but a piece of paper. A man is the only one who doesn't see any benefits in this, that, and the third of a monetary situation. Because guess what's also on a piece of paper? A prenup. If they're feeling that insecure about it, if they're feeling like they don't feel protected, they can always go consult with a lawyer, have a lawyer draw up a prenup, and they can do the things that are necessary to protect themselves, and then they can move forward in a marriage. So now we have removed all of the excuses. We have removed all of the shenanigans that we're talking about. So at the end of the day, sis, at the end of the day, bro, you can still have this conversation in a bold manner. Don't you let nobody come up to you with the excuse of a piece of paper, not another day. And we can open the doors of the church off of that one, because that was a good word. It's estate planning. It's legacy planning. We're thinking of other things outside of ourselves. And half of the men who talking about, oh, my money, men don't benefit and they lose all their money. The men who talking, half of them ain't got money or a pot to piss in anyway. So why are you going on? Take a bet. Take a risk. My soapbox moment. Let us scale back, stay focused, sis, because we are almost done with chapter 10. And I feel like I went on that tangent because I don't want to talk about this last momentous occasion. And it happens on page 142 and 143. So you remember that conversation that they had of the intervention that they were trying to have with her dad about he need to go and do the hospital, or he need to go and do the doctor things and set the doctor's appointment because his feet swelling and his throat swelling too. Well, he went on down to the doctor, but by way of the ambulance because he didn't want to listen when they told him. And so essentially what has happened is his body has swollen. Other parts of his body is now swelling. The doctor is trying to do everything that they can to comfort him, but there's really little that they can do. They can't really do anything that's preventative now because he's at a state where he really can't be helped outside of what they're trying to do to assist in his comfort. So there's this part on 142 where she says that she goes to see him. The hospital is quiet. He has labored breathing, and she's like literally just watching her dad. And she says, what was left was only one truth. We were reaching the end. Because she said they were staring at each other, not really saying each other. They had said everything that they needed to say. And this was the truth, that they were reaching the end. He would not recover. He was going to miss the whole rest of my life. I was losing his steadiness, his comfort, his everyday joy. I felt tears spilling down my cheeks. Keeping his gaze on me, my father lifted the back of my hand to his lips and kissed it again and again and again. It was his way of saying, hush now, don't cry. He was expressing sorrow and urgency, but also something calmer and deeper, a message he wanted to make clear. With those kisses, he was saying that he loved me with his whole heart, that he was proud of the woman I'd become. He was saying that he knew he should have gone to the doctor sooner. He was asking for forgiveness. He was saying goodbye. And on page 143, she culminates the chapter by saying, because by the time the sun came up, he'd gone. My father, Fraser Robinson III, had a heart attack and passed away that night, having given us absolutely everything. Let me tell you, sis. Let me tell you, bro. Lean in. I cried like a baby at the end of this chapter when I saw that. Now she mollywopped us with Suzanne's death, and I just, that one was different. But when I saw this chapter 10 ending of, and I said it last week, I was like, hopefully we don't go through no more deaths. And I'm thinking, here, Dandy and Grandma, and no, it's her daddy. Like, sucker punched us with this one. I mean, just like, we weren't ready. It was just like a doo-doo, The fact of the matter is, and that's like, you don't necessarily know how things will actually change and a trajectory will shift. I will say this though, based off of that lesson, the hospital and the doctors could do nothing else for her father when he came in because he did not come in early enough for preventative care. By way of that information, lean in, black men. Come on, lean in. Lean in a little bit closer. Come here. We love you all. What we need for you all to do is to start scheduling your regular doctor's appointments. Yes, there is this space of we don't trust doctors, we don't trust this. And by way of natural history, there is not a lot to be trusted because the mortality rate amongst Black people is still a lot higher at the hospitals than not. But one thing that we can also kind of rely on and look at is that the rate of Black and brown doctors has increased over time. And so we do have some doctors that can be more of reliable resources to talk us through what is necessary and what is needed for our healthcare. So Black men, go to the doctor. And don't fight your family when they're trying to tell you for your own good to go. Because we would much rather have you around for the long haul, as opposed to regretting the fact that you couldn't go any further because you didn't want to go when it was preventative. All right. That is it for chapter 10. Moving on to chapter 11. So here's what's taking place. She and her brother Craig are trying to process their grief of their father's passing. She and her brother Craig have she says it's the first and only argument that they have as adult children or as adults. And it is through the processing of trying to figure out what type of casket to get their father. Former First Lady Obama is like, we got to get him something fancy because he was the greatest dad of all time and there will never be another to do it like him. Craig is of the thought process that our dad would not want anything fancy. He would want something that is less fancy and more plain and more suitable to his taste and his style. So this is what they're arguing about, to the point where the argument is no longer the argument and they are no longer arguing about that. Now, on page 146, Forever First Lady is having some moments of realizing the brevity of morality and how life is short. And so she says, losing dad exacerbated my sense that there was no time to sit around and ponder how my life should go. My father was just 55 when he died. So forgive me for the previous notice that I say he was 52. He was 55, but he was still young. 55 when he died. Suzanne had been 26. The lesson there was simple. Life is short and not to be wasted. If I died, I didn't want people remembering me for the stacks of legal briefs I'd written for the corporate trademarks I'd helped defend. I felt certain that I had something more to offer the world. It was time to move. Or time to make a move. So in this space of realizing the brevity of morality, of like mortality, the brevity of mortality, she is in this space of realizing, like, you know, it's solidifying in her, because we found her in chapter 10 realizing like, I'm not fulfilled. But by chapter 11, she's solidified in this, like, oh no, I can't stay here and be a lawyer any longer than I have to. So she's now in this space of mobilizing. She's taking meetings for new job prospects. She's networking, and in the network, she's taking meetings and she's leaving to try to leave corporate law behind. And so she lands an interview with Valerie Jarrett, who is working at City Hall, on page 150. And 151. And she talks about how they had the interview and everything like that. But she said that years later, Valerie would tell me that, to her surprise, I'd managed to reverse the standard interview process on her that day, that I'd given her some basic helpful information about myself. But otherwise, I'd grilled her, wanting to understand every last feeling she had about the work she did and how responsive the mayor was to his employees. I was testing the suitability of the work for me as much as she was testing the suitability of me to do the work. So the interview with Valerie was for a position at City Hall working on the administrative team of the mayor, because Valerie Jarrett was on the team of the mayor. And so in this space, she's trying to truth with the history of how she's known politics, which is, you can't trust politics, specifically for Black people, because it leaves us without a job, it leaves us outside of the know, and it leaves us underpaid. We are underpaid, unemployed, and pretty much just not thought of in that way anyway. So she's trying to reconcile that with the fact that this is also a great opportunity, and it gives her the opportunity to leave corporate law. Now, she's not going to be making the $120,000 that she's making over at Sidley and Austin. She'll actually be making about half of that at $60,000. But she's trying to figure these things out, right? She's trying to get it together. When her boyfriend gets out of law school, he's not concerned about passing the bar exam he's going to go sit for. He thinks that he's already gotten it. So they go and celebrate prematurely the same day that he finished taking the bar exam. So one thing that they do is they go out to dinner, and how she talks about in chapter 10, they usually have these marriage conversations. They're not necessarily resolved. They understand that they have differing viewpoints of what marriage is and how they see it. And so here we are in this space. They are now getting ready to have another marriage conversation at this dinner, even though they're supposed to be celebrating him taking the bar exam and things of that nature. And they're at a fancy restaurant, guys. And so she talks about how they are going through these things. She's letting him have it. He's serving her with a counterpoint and things of that nature. They are really going at it at this table, but they're also doing it in a civilized way. She's trying to remain calm because she's like, honey, I am one that I'll breathe fire and I'll yell, but I'm trying to keep my composure because we at this restaurant with these white people. So by the end of the conversation, this is a multi-course meal that they're having this conversation over. By the end of the course, and they're going to the dessert, the waiter lifts the tray. There's a velvet box there, obviously with her engagement ring in it. And former President Barack Obama proposes to her. He baited her for an entire argument for a night. And he finished the night by proposing to her. And she said it took her a minute to come off of her mad to really sit in a space of joy that he's actually proposing. It's like, honey, I was upset. I was mad. And I didn't know if I really want to accept his proposal at the moment. I don't want it. You keep your funky ring. You should have proposed 2 minutes ago while I wasn't mad. But no, she said she calmed down. She calmed down to a space and a place where she was able to actually accept his proposal for what it is. She said yes. And so now they're in a space of working towards marriage, right? So the last thing that we will actually take a look at in chapter 11 is the fact that she and her now fiance are taking a trip to his father's land of Nairobi, Kenya. Girl, listen, talk about getting flued out. So they take the trip to Nairobi, Kenya, and the trip is more so to visit his dad's side of the family, not to necessarily visit his dad or meet with his dad, but because I can't remember if that was actually highlighted of them meeting with the dad as much as meeting with their granny Sarah. So they get to the airport. Alma, his older half sister, is the one who goes to see him at the airport. There is the understanding that there are other siblings as well that his father has had, but there's not any like intimation of them actually meeting one another. But it does say that Alma is, like, my goodness. Talks about how she's pretty brainy, kind of like her brother. You know how First Lady Obama is really referring to like how she's in this space of noticing the things. She notices the resemblance of him to his sister, the same smile that they have, you know, like the similarities that they have, and even like their braininess, because she was raised in Kenya and returned there often, but she had gone to college in Germany and was still living there, studying for a PhD. She was fluent in English, German, Swahili, and her family's local language called Luo. So, let me tell you, honey, Alma is a force to be reckoned with. But essentially, a lot of their entertainment and things of that nature happen to be with Alma. And then they talk about how they went to their grandmother's estate, who's known as Granny Sarah. And Granny Sarah is just a joy. She's a joy. She said, Granny Sarah looked at her and was like, which one of your parents is white? And she was like, oh no, I had to look at Granny Sarah and really, just kind of actually tell her like, no, my parents ain't white, they black. We black. But she also talked about how Granny Sarah had wise eyes, a crinkling smile, how she didn't speak any English. She only spoke Luo, but that really didn't stop the kinship that was there. There was this kind of notion sometimes that Africa is just this welcoming country of you need to come and sit in the motherland. And she kind of dispelled that myth from her particular experience that it was not all that. But she did have a wonderful time with Granny Sarah, with Alma and her fiance, just taking in the lands and the sights and understanding that she is a foreigner in this land and someone new to the normalities of this land. But she said in 162, she leaves us with where she is in this positioning of her life. She said she had a new job, a fiance, and an expanded family, and a proven Kenyan granny even. It was true. I'd been flung out of my world, and for the moment, it was all good. So Chapter 10 has uprooted her life yet again because of of her losing her father and realizing life is short, realizing she can't stand being a lawyer and all of those things. And now she's in this space of a new season of life and trying to figure it out. But she feels okay in this space of having the approval of the Kenyan grandmother, Granny Sarah, and, meeting Alma and having a fiance who loves her and supports her in these journeys of how she's wanting to really kind of maneuver in the next season and spaces of her life that give more fulfillment and more purpose towards the passions that she would like to kind of, more passions that she would like to actually provide. All right, final chapter 12. So here's what's going on. And I think it was really, really nice. So the Obamas have officially become the Obamas, girl. They have officially become the Obamas. So they are man and wife. They got married in October of 1992. So now they are in this space where they are married. Although at their wedding, as we learned, they're missing her dad because he had died of a heart attack. And we also learned that Gramps also passed away that prior winter to cancer. So we were missing those two individuals from the wedding, which I thought was just like, oh no, but also like, just like, the fact that she would still honor them in that way. But she talked about how the wedding was very huge. It was a big wedding, over 300 people, because as a girl from the South Side, she got all of these cousins. And then there's also the space of former President Barack Obama bringing his family in from the Hawaiis, from the Nairobis, from, friends and his boy posse and all this other stuff. And then they got, people that they've met from college, people that they've met from in the law firm, some from Sidley and Austin, some from the new firm that President Barack Obama is working with, some from City Hall downtown, and things of that nature. So they have a lot of people at this wedding. And one thing that she talks about is like the seriousness, the power of the wedding, of her wedding, and what she understood it to be on pages 165. And she actually talked about how I felt it then, the power of what we were doing, the significance of the ritual as we stood there with our futures still unwritten, with every unknown still utterly unknown, just gripping each other's hands as we said our vows, Whatever was out there, we'd step into it together. I had faith in this union, faith in this man to declare it was the easiest thing in the world. Looking at Barack's face, I knew for sure that he felt the same way. But I thought that in that space of her just really giving that description of like really understanding the weight of being married, the weight of what her ceremony would mean for her and her husband going forward. I thought that was absolutely beautiful that she would even highlight it, because sis, come on and lean in. Come on and lean in, because this is another word for our situations on today. I love that she pointed out the weightiness of a marriage, because I think that if we really truly understood the weightiness of getting married, there would be a lot less of the quickness of being married of it, because it's easy to stay in the better. It's easier to stay in the health. It's easier to stay in the rich part. But what about the poor? What about the sickness? What about the worst? And I'm thankful that she actually brought that up of like, there is weightiness in this, and that she really took in that moment to really pay attention to it. She understood what it meant. And the fact that she had belief in the partner that she was marrying, that he also carried that same weight, that he also understood what they were doing. And that in this life, but for anything else, that they would continue to be partners with one another in those spaces. They meant what they were saying, and they were going to work at what they were saying if the work needed to be done. That's all I'm saying, sis. That's all I'm saying. You need to understand the weightiness of it. And I think she brought it out beautifully. The good news of them returning back from the honeymoon was that Bill Clinton was now president. Which was a lot of the things, because Chicago was actually in a work of doing the Democratic work, and former President Barack Obama at that time was really boots on the ground, really trying to sign up Black people to register to vote, because their vote matters, and that Black people can really effectuate change in the political hemisphere and in the political space. But the bad news was, the book deadline that, her big deal hotshot boyfriend had before they became a fiance, before they became a husband and wife, that book deal deadline had lapsed. So here's the thing that we know, that no matter how you slice it, $40,000 is a lot of money to have to then pay it back because you missed the deadline for a book that you promised that you would write, right? So there's that. So in the space of him, in the space of this verse, there is a lot that goes along with it, right? He comes up with this list of needs that he has to do, because he's like, I can write this book. I just need to remove all of the distractions away from me, and then I can get this book written. And so then he hits your forever first lady with these words, and he's like, I'm gonna write this book in isolation, kind of like how you do an all-nighter for a paper. But this time it's going to be for a couple of months, and he's going to get the book finished. And she said that your former president relayed this information to her one night while they were at home about 6 weeks after their wedding. 6 weeks after their wedding. And then she said he did it before he delicately dropped a final bit of information, that his mother had found him the perfect cabin. In fact, she'd already rented it for him. It was cheap, quiet, and on the beach in Sanur, which was on the Indonesian island of Bali, some 9,000 miles away from her. Then she goes on to ask the question, What happens when a solitude-loving individualist marries an outgoing family woman who does not love solitude one bit? And then she goes on to answer the question on page 171 also, where she says, you find ways to adapt. If you're in it forever, there's really no choice. 6 weeks into saying the for better or worse, richer or poor, sickness and health, as long as we both shall live, he hit her with I missed the deadline. I got to pay these people back $40,000 or I got to actually write the book. I'm going to write the book because there's also these job offers that he has in the way. And he's talking about he's going to be an adjunct professor as well. So here's the thing that he said that he needs to do. I just need to go into isolation. So I'm going to go to Bali. By the way, my mama already paid for the room in Bali, and it's just going to take me a couple of months. So I'm going to be over in Indonesia, and you going to figure out life here for the next couple of months until I get this book written. What? Who 6 weeks after their marriage just sit there and really takes in this information that they husband going to Indonesia? You having a honeymoon after our honeymoon, but one by yourself, a solitary honeymoon? I don't think so. Tell your mama to book me a ticket too, and we going together. At least for the first couple of weeks. But also, that is wild. And she talked about how she was like, it sounds a little bit like a bad joke, like a little bit. How about a lot bit forever first lady? Like a lot of bit. 6 weeks. That means a month and a half, a month and 2 weeks into her marriage. Her husband is on a plane going to write a book for a deadline that he has missed. So, and that's the catch-22. Do you let your husband get on the plane or not? Because at this point, if he don't get on the plane and he don't write the book, somehow y'all got to figure out how to pay these people $4,000 back that they already gave him. And 9 times out of 10, if he gave that advance, y'all already spent it. Even if you haven't spent all of it, you spent some of it. Because again, they're young. They're 20s, like late 20s, but still 20s. You don't think clearly. You don't think sensibly in your 20s without $40,000 advancement check. And $40,000 quiet as kept in 1990s, that went a long way. That's a lot of money. So, in the space of what she talks about, she said you find ways to adapt and you're in it forever. Now in the space of being introduced to a new term of her husband, no longer her fiance, no longer her boyfriend, but her husband, and how he's, how she's practicing this term and he's not there. My husband is finishing a book. My husband is doing this, but he's not here. And so she talks about how she could see how this was his way of what is the word? This is his way of handling the business that needs to be handled without introducing her to the chaotic nature of the business, because she had nothing to do with it in the first place. And so she's thinking from the standpoint of he's trying to be considerate. But there's also moments where she's feeling lonely and she does think, oh, you out here doing a honeymoon away from, a second honeymoon after our first honeymoon, but your honeymoon this time is away by yourself. And I just wonder how she felt about his mom, knowing this information first and knowing that she bought the cabin. Are we grateful for our mother-in-law because let us be honest, we ain't got cabin money? Or are we angry with mother-in-law because you are enabling this man to leave me for 2 months? Yeah, that's a good one because wow. All right. So in this space of her husband is now in a whole nother country working on a book. She is now in this space of really trying to figure out the type of dynamic of a marriage that she wants. But here's the thing. Here's the kicker. She and her then fiance actually had these conversations prior to, and now she's actually having the thought process of how she's actually going to bring it to fruition. This is not like I'm just now thinking about what my marriage will look like. No, they've already had the conversation of what the marriage is going to look like. It's going to look a little bit more modern. It's not going to look like the 60s or the 70s, and we're going to make this work for ourselves. She's just now in this space where she has the time to actually think about what that looks like for her while her husband is away. So don't get it twisted. If you out here thinking that you're going to figure out what your marriage is going to look like after you get married, sis, I don't know what you're doing, unless it is an arranged marriage and y'all got to now have these conversations because the arrangement is happening. If you are out here freely getting married and you are not having these conversations prior to the I do's, I don't know what's wrong with you. That is problematic. If you have the opportunity to have these discussions prior to you getting married, have the discussion, because you may find out that maybe y'all are on the same page and maybe you're not. And if you're on the same page, then you can move forward. But if you're not on the same page, sis, you might need to postpone some stuff, put a pause on it and figure it out. And if you can't get to a same page with this individual, it might be time to just say, okay, God bless. God bless. That's all I'm saying. All right. So she goes through this thought process of the 60s, 70s viewpoint of a wife. Right? Because she's talking about how now she's dealing with these thoughts of what a wife would be like, and how it was portrayed in the media at that time. It was usually a white woman who was staying home. Her husband was a man of means who went out and worked and had a nice paying job that they could afford their bills. So she is just at the home. It's giving very Leave It to Beaver. It's giving very Jeffersons for the blacks, and things of that nature. That's what it's giving. It's giving, we have means, we have money, so I'm going to stay at home. I'm going to, I'm going to do the things to make sure that my kids and my husband are okay. And that's what you see on the screen, that a wife really kind of puts herself on a back burner. She doesn't necessarily complain. She doesn't really talk about the things that she needs for herself. She doesn't really ask for much. It is more so about the things of the household. She doesn't even buy things for the households like the I Love Lucy's and things of that nature. It is a lot to do with the household. We are talking about household products to clean the house. The vacuum demonstrator man that comes by, who she may flirt with every now and then, but she knows that nope, can't entertain this because you can't mess this money up because the man is out here working. So she's processing through that thought process, but she's like, no, I don't want to be that. I want to be more so of like a Mary Tyler Moore, who during that time, Mary Tyler Moore was very revolutionary because Mary Tyler Moore was a woman of her own means. She had her own job, her own career. She was not out here having conversations about homemaking. She was not out here having conversations about what to do with the kids. She was not out here having a conversation about how to please her husband. She was like, I'm going to wear these good sporty outfits. My hair going to be laid and slayed, and what we're not doing is keeping everybody in the forefront of ourselves. We're gonna go out here and we're gonna work on this career, and that's what it's going to be. So she talks about how she's in this balance of trying to figure out the things, but then she also takes a look at her mother, who at one point was a housewife, but her mother in the space of just being a wife in general. In 73, she even goes further. She says, I wanted to live with the hat-tossing, independent career woman zest of Mary Tyler Moore, and at the same time, I gravitated towards stabilizing, self-sacrificing, seemingly bland normalcy of being a wife and a mother. I wanted to have a work life and a home life, but with some promise that one would not fully squelch the other. I hope to be exactly like my own mother, and at the same time, nothing like her at all. I feel like that is a lot of the conversation that I have with a lot of my friends, my good girlfriends today. How we saw our mothers and the activities of the things that they did throughout our lives. And one thing that we credit is that our mothers are rock stars, and we absolutely credit them with everything of the successes of our lives and the things that they taught us. And for that, we want to be just like them. But then there are other things that in our lives we're like, I cannot be like her in that. And so I think it is very I think it's very wonderful that she actually gives us that option to really toy with those ideas as well. And I'm just so grateful and so thankful that she actually brought it up, because being someone that I am in a space where I am like considering marriage, those are some of the things that I actually battle with. Like, what of me continuing to have a career? What of me continuing to be in a space where I still want to hold on to a little bit of my individualism in terms of the success of a way that I would want to forge on my own, a career that I would want to forge on my own, unattached to a husband's career. So I'm glad that she brought it up. I thought it was absolutely well formatted and well done. Just chef's kiss. And toward the end of the chapter, we find out that that our former president Barack Obama has returned from Bali with a book that is mostly finished. He sold it to, he gave it to his agent, who sold it to a new publisher, and he was able to pay off his old debt. And so that actually worked out. And then on page 174, we realize that she has changed her career again to go into a nonprofit field. I think the beauty of chapter 12, because that's essentially how she leaves chapter 12, of like just she's still in a space of figuring everything out. She got settled in another career. Everything is, seeming to be well. And then she shifts and, the path changes again. And I think the beauty of where we see her in chapters 10, 11, and 12 is that she is in this space of really embracing the differences of what's going on in her life, the differences of the people that are now in her life versus who was in her life before, the differences of the career that's in her life versus what was her career before, and the feelings that she feels about all of these things in her life versus what she felt before, in terms of feeling like she's on a pathway to do something that is more fulfilling, versus when we first meet her in chapter 10, she's in a space of I'm unfulfilled and I don't know what to do. So I think that this is really, really, we are in a great space of trying to figure out the things. We're really searching through like some of the things that you really kind of meet in the space of like your late 20s, early 30s, the things that you really want to kind of process through and go through. Now, side note, I will say this. The way that they went and made sure that the Black people were registered to vote, I would say and admonish everybody, especially as it pertains to our election that is coming up in 2024. You need to go make sure that you are registered to vote. And if you are not registered to vote, you need to make sure that you are doing the things to get properly registered to vote. That is a public service announcement for chapter 12. And I'm just going to leave that soapbox right there, because here's the thing. This is what I noticed about some of the people in my community. What we tend to do, I'm going to leave this earring out because I'm almost done anyway, sis. What we tend to do in our community is this. We don't show up for the voting booth. We don't go out to the polls. And then we spend the rest of the cycle talking about the people in the office and what they should, and the shoulda, coulda, wouldas, and what they should have done. And this is my message to you. And I feel like you should stand 20 feet tall, talking to anybody else as it pertains to politics and the things of that nature. And it's simply this. I can't have no conversation with you about complaining about the state of this government when you did not go exercise your right to vote. That's just it. We are no longer, gone are the days that we are having conversations with individuals who want to complain about the government, but they didn't even put a vote in for a possibility of a differing type of government. If you are upset with how your government looks, you can even go out and change it if you register to vote. Go to the polls, stand in the lines, take your water and everything else that they're doing. They're gerrymandering these maps and trying to figure out, do the preparation ahead of time. Figure out what you need. Do you need your driver's license to reflect a certain thing? How do the addresses need to match? Can you do an absentee ballot and vote, or do you have to go in person? What are the things that need to be in place? And I say, go ahead and start. It's no time like the present to go ahead and start in a 2022 when the election year is 2 years around the corner, because if you go ahead and just set yourself up for the success now, you don't have to worry about being turned around at the polls in November. So that is my soapbox for chapter 12 in general, because even in chapter 12, they talk about how one thing that was learned from the election that year when Bill Clinton was elected as president the first time around, when he was going against George W.H. or George H.W. When he went against George H.W. Bush and made George H.W. a one-term president, it was the understanding that a Black person's power to vote, it is powerful. Like, we have a voting power that is one that could really shift the trajectory of our government. But for us going out, a lot of times we don't register to vote and we don't go out and vote as we are supposed to. There is a continuation that needs to happen. And even as we approach November in 2022 for midterm elections, I would even say go ahead and go out and start doing your things now in preparation to vote, because midterm elections are coming up. And that's the thing. We should not just be concerned about 2024 elections of a president. You need to be as concerned about midterm elections, because a lot of the rules and things and legislation that come in place come by way of the people who are in legislation, in terms of your governors, your senators, your district leaders. And you vote for those more often in a midterm election every 2 years. And you vote for them again in the 4-year cycle along with the president. Okay. So all I'm saying is go make sure you're registered to vote. Figure that stuff out. You got like a month and a half to maybe like a little bit more than a month and a half to figure it out. But figure it out, because we got to vote. And that is what it is. That's my soapbox for chapter 12. I have been on here long enough. The chapters were really, really good. I already told you my thoughts in terms of the chapters, in terms of like me crying and things of that nature. I'm not going to say nothing about hopefully we don't see nobody else leave, but this was something. But I will say this, the fact that she is giving us evolutions of herself, and it's not necessarily just someone who's stuck in the legal field all her life or for her career. And the fact that she is in a space where she's like, I want to change. And she also has a partner who understands that. I think it's absolutely beautiful, because sometimes we do get into these spaces, and especially when we are in these new places and we got family members who don't necessarily know how to maneuver those, and they just stick in a job for as long as they can for the money, and they don't necessarily know how to speak to, okay, well, here's how you can transition your fulfillment into also getting a point. I think it's very, very admirable that she has the support system of her husband to really just kind of encourage her to make the necessary changes and to do the things that need to be done. All right, guys. This has been a whirlwind of a discussion for today, and I just want to acknowledge that next week we are doing chapters 13, 14, and 15. And I also want to acknowledge that we have officially gotten through halfway of the book. To look at you go. Halfway through this book already. We have read 174 pages of this book already. Pat yourself on the back, because it is not a small feat. Because again, we don't be out here reading the things unless we are assigned to do so. So here we are. We've gotten through chapters 10, 11, and 12. 12 chapters actually solidifies half of the 24 that we've already read. We'll go through chapters 13, 14, and 15 next week. That should be exciting. because she's going to talk about, I'm sure she's going to talk about her new job. I'm sure she's going to talk about the evolutions of the job and things of that nature. And maybe who knows, we'll probably also get like a new stance or an approach to how she is with, you know, trying to balance the idea of motherhood, because that is something that she's also thinking about. So it is, I feel like it's going to be really exciting, and I'm really excited to explore this with you guys. So until then, saints and ain'ts, y'all be blessed. And I just want to say I am enjoying this journey with you all. I would really appreciate it if you guys kind of go down in the comments, let me know just some of the things that we talked about today. Let me know, especially for chapter 12. Would you be okay with your in-laws pitching in on a cabin for your now husband, who's been your husband for a month and a half, to go to Bali to finish a book that you know he needs to finish, because if not, y'all got paid his $40,000? Just a question for you. Put it in the comments, girl. Let me know. And anything else that you thought was great to have been addressed. Okay, so until next time, I'm hungry, so I'm gonna go eat. Until next time, saints and ain'ts, where we do this all over again next week, going over chapters 13, 14, and 15. I will say goodbye.